Gettysburg Museum of History Studios.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. And, it's February, which means it's Black History Month. And we have a guest on now who's going to talk about the USCT, the United States Colored Troops. Steward Henderson is his name. And I just watched a video that he did. It was during the Emerging Civil Wars Symposium during COVID. And it was very strange when they panned to the audience. There was one guy in the audience, and I didn't know at first that it was during COVID. And I felt terrible. Like, oh, God, there's one guy in the audience for this talk. And I was like, this poor fella. But then later they put a notification up saying it was done during COVID. And therefore, there was no live audience. And I was very much relieved for our guest because this is a very interesting topic. And so let's welcome Steward Henderson to the show. Welcome, Steward.
Oh, thank you.
You're very welcome.
There were 6 speakers that day, so
yeah, and everybody had to sit there to an empty room. That must have been awkward, right?
It was very awkward. Yes,
because you're not used to that.
Not used to it at all.
No, but I got to say, Chris Mikowski, when he introduced you, I thought he was talking to a live audience, and then when you got up, I thought you were talking to a live audience until they panned around. The first clue I should have had was when he announced you and nobody applauded.
Yeah.
And I said, something's not right here, but okay. We should mention, on the way in today, I heard the news that Jesse Jackson died.
Right. I heard that.
Yeah. So I don't know if you want to share any thoughts on Jesse Jackson.
Well, he had been sick for a long time, but basically, I had contact with him from about 1981 to about 1988. My brother-in-law was in Chicago at the time, and then Harold Washington was running for mayor. And they asked me to come up and help with the campaign. And we operated out of Operation Push, which was Jesse Jackson's organization. So I got to meet him there. And then later when he ran for president, I was in Washington, D.C. That's my hometown. And I worked on his campaign there. And that was a long, long time ago.
Yeah. Well, I went to college at George Mason University, and he was supposed to come and speak. And this was during the 2000 election. And so it was in the student center, and, it was like right out there in the food court and everything. And so I'm like, well, let me go see Jesse Jackson speak, famous person. Never saw a famous person at that point in my life. And so we go in, and he's running late because he's stuck in traffic coming out of Dulles Airport. He flew into Dulles, and then there was like a bad traffic jam, and he was running late. But he eventually, they said, okay, he's not going to make it on time. So we have him on the phone, and they patched it through the sound system, and he spoke to everybody on the phone. And I thought that was pretty cool. And he had a very clever, because that was Bush versus Gore. And I thought it was clever at the time. He had a very clever little saying. And he said, he said something about, during this election, I think of what my mother always used to tell me when we were kids and we'd go out and play, stay out the bushes. and it didn't work for that election, but it was a pretty clever thing. So that was the closest I ever came to Jesse Jackson, was an amplified phone call. Yeah.
Well, I never really got to speak to him other than to say hi. That's all. So
yeah,
that was about it.
Well, he was definitely an interesting guy, a very controversial many times, but had a very interesting career and in the public, and it's just they're dropping like flies. I'm telling you, it's all the old ones are going.
Well, I think he was like 84 years old now, so.
It's funny. I don't think of him as that old, but yeah, I guess he was, right?
Yeah, I do, because when I first saw him, I was in high school.
Oh, okay, all right.
Well, I mean, I saw him on TV then when Martin Luther King was shot.
Assassinated. Right. Yeah, right. He was there. He was right next to him, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right next to him.
God, experienced a lot. Well, we're going to go about 100 years before then, and we're going to talk about the men in the Civil War, the black men who fought in the Civil War. Everybody knows, you start off the talk with talking about glory and how that was probably the first inkling that Americans had that there were black soldiers in the Civil War. Now, I was 12-ish when that came out, and I remember going to see it on my birthday. Maybe I was 13. I don't remember. But I remember going to see it on my birthday, and I was by no means what you would call a Civil War buff by that point, but I had some, casual interest in the Civil War. And I thought it was made up. I remember thinking that, I thought it was made up. I didn't think that it was real, that there were black soldiers, because everything I've seen prior to that was a Civil War movie, there were no black soldiers.
True.
So go ahead and unpack that a little bit for me, if you will.
Well, for me, I was fortunate enough to know about the U.S. colored troops about the 1960s. I was in an organization called the Organization of Afro-American Culture, which was founded by one of my uncles, and called him my Uncle Mac. And he taught us a lot about African history and African-American history. So I knew about the U.S. colored troops then. He was also an artist, so he painted a picture of U.S. military through the years. And the first time I saw a black officer for the Civil War was on his painting. So I knew there were soldiers in the Civil War before.
Okay.
And then when the movie Glory came out, at that time I was a branch manager for, what was it? Wasn't even Crestar then, it was Perpetual Federal Savings Bank. And I was managing the Capitol Hill office. And I went to see the movie. And then I found out that part of the 54th Company B was actually raised in Washington, D.C. And in 94, at that time I was a regional manager, and the bank was now Crestar, then became SunTrust.
Oh, yeah.
Now Truist.
Yeah.
So I was area manager, and I got to go to a reenactment at Fort Stevens, and Company B of the 54th Massachusetts was there. So I talked to some of the guys, and I was really wanting to join because I saw the movie Glory, and I saw these guys, and talked to them for quite some time. But I was on 24-hour call, so there's no way I could join them then. Then in 1998, when they unveiled the African American Memorial and statue right in front of what's now the African American Civil War Museum and Memorial, I saw them again, and that was 1998. And again, I really wanted to join them, but I was still an area manager, so I was on 24-hour call, so I couldn't do it. But then I came down after I retired to the Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania National Military Park. I was a volunteer. And I retired January 2005, February 2005, I was a volunteer at the park. And they told me the story of the 23rd USCT when I was down there. So in 2010, a white historian, a good friend of mine, John Cummings, and I was out at Spotsylvania Courthouse. I just finished doing a tour out there, and he was measuring the trenches for his upcoming book at that time. This was like September of 2010. So he said, it would be a shame that since the 150th anniversary is coming up, that we don't recognize the 23rd USCT. So he asked me about it and said, well, I'm originally from Washington, D.C., so I don't know a lot of, people that would be interested in U.S. colored troops down here. But I said, well, let me try. So I have a cousin, because my maternal side of the family is from Fredericksburg. So my cousin Lavaniel Ennis introduced me to Hashmel Turner. Reverend Hashmel Turner was a pastor, and he was also a former city council member of Fredericksburg. So when I talked to him, he says, even if it's just you and me, there will be a 23rd. So January 2011, we had our first meeting with 5 people. And in that first year, we went to the reenactment for the Battle of Chancellorsville. And when we got there, somebody saw some of the 54th, Company B. There were 3 Company B members there because they had been playing the 23rd. So they told them, well, we have our own 23rd now. So that's when I was introduced to 3 of the members of the 54th Massachusetts that I hadn't met before.
Okay.
It was Lou Carter, Howard Lambert, and Robert Wright. And so they kind of mentored us because we were brand new into the living history reenactment field. And we did quite a few events together. But we really came together in April of 2012. We went up to help them with the Emancipation Day parade. So we all marched in the parade together, and then we had a lunch after that. So I think it was Kevin Williams and myself were the only of the 23rd there. But we went to lunch with about 12 members of the 54th, and that's when we really got to meet them, and that's when Kevin and I joined the 54th as well. Then later on, several of our members joined the 54th, and some of their members joined our group as well. And the big thing was that same year, 2012, we went down to Appomattox. Actually, the Museum of the Confederacy had contacted me and asked me to have the 23rd come down and be the color guard for General U.S. Grant, with which Larry Clowers played him. Larry Clowers,
yeah.
He's from Gettysburg, so
I used to know him. Is he still around?
I haven't seen him since about 2016 or so, like that.
I saw him last time I saw him was during the shutdown. Not shutdown, the lockdowns, the COVID lockdowns. Walking around the battlefield. He and his wife and me and my friend were walking around, and we passed each other and waved hello and everything. And then I haven't seen him since then. Yeah,
because I met him when I was working at the bookstore at the park. And then I met him again when I was a seasonal ranger. And then I met him right before we went down there to Appomattox.
Mm-hmm.
And we were only supposed to be at the color guard at the opening. But then he told everybody that organized the event that he wanted us for his honor guard at the surrender. So we stayed around for the surrender as well.
That's cool.
But we did march in Gettysburg Remembrance Day. I think somebody's marched in every year from the 23rd since 2011.
Yeah, okay.
So I met him up there again in 2011 when he saw us march. And ever since then, we were pretty close. So in 2014, when we actually did have the 150th anniversary, we invited him down so he could be one of the keynote speakers.
Mm-hmm.
Him as a keynote speaker, and Dr. James K. Bryant II, because he did a lot of the actual research on the 23rd USCT. So they were keynote speakers in the second part of our program. The first part, John Hennessy, who was chief historian of Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania National Military Park, he was a keynote speaker for the first part of our anniversary. So we had part of it at the park on the Chancellorsville battlefield. And the second half of the celebration was actually on the site where the 23rd actually fought. And the importance of the 23rd, the reason why we wanted to make sure that they were celebrated, because they were the first African-American soldiers to fight in directed combat against the Army of Northern Virginia.
The 23rd.
Spotsylvania Courthouse.
Yeah.
15th, 1864.
What? So you mentioned that now. So I'll ask you this now. What was the reaction in the Army of Northern Virginia? I mean, they must have heard that there were black troops fighting for the North. But yeah. So here they actually are now up against them. Did they leave any reactions on paper to having gone up against them?
I don't think so. I have never heard anything about it, but they went up against General Thomas Rosser's Confederate Cavalry Brigade. Now, they actually, Rosser's men actually chased the 2nd Ohio from Piney Branch Church, which was is in Spotsylvania, but it's quite a ways away from, about 8 miles away from the actual main battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse. And they chased the 2nd Ohio all the way to the Orange Plank Road, Catharpin Road intersection. And, the 4th Division of the 9th Corps which was under General Ambrose Burnside. Many people don't know Burnside came back as commander of the Ninth Corps, independent Ninth Corps for the Overland Campaign. And he had a division of U.S. colored troops. So General Edward Ferrero was the commander, and he ordered the 23rd, who were at the Chancellorsville ruins, and they double-quicked 2 miles, and they went to that intersection. The Confederates had the intersection, and they chased them away. And then 4 days later, the entire 4th Division of the Ninth Corps fought against Rosser's cavalry. He was just probing the lines to see where the Union lines were at the time. So these were 2 skirmishes, but they were the first time that the USCT fought in directed combat against the Army of Northern Virginia. And this also goes back to the importance of Fredericksburg in the Civil War, because they did have the 4 major battles and make it the bloodiest landscape in North America. But the first time the Union Army occupies Fredericksburg, over 10,000 enslaved people will escape that area following the Union Army. And that's the largest self-emancipation during the Civil War. You know, they followed them to Washington and Arlington and parts of Maryland near D.C. But many of those men came back as members of the 4th Division of the Ninth Corps. We had several that were in the 23rd, but the other regiments had some too. And those men were fighting against some of their former slave masters. And the white soldiers, the Union white soldiers, didn't believe that they would fight against them. But then after the 23rd skirmish with them, then the 2nd Ohio men told the other white soldiers that the black soldiers will fight against those old slave masters.
You had mentioned that when you are in a parade, people see you coming and they all yell, "Give them hell, 54th," even though you're the 23rd. But again, like, so it's fascinating to me because, you know, it's like history is such a complicated thing. You know, you grow up a certain way. And you're led to believe certain truths. And then you get out into the world and you meet other people and they go, "Well, that's not all that happened," or "That's not what happened at all," or whatever. And then they show you, you know, evidence to the contrary. And maybe you don't believe it, but you go, maybe I don't know half of what I know, or, you know, maybe I've been lied to, or whatever the case may be. So on the one hand, while Glory did a great thing in that it brought attention to the fact that, you know, it wasn't just white people fighting the Civil War, and it's a war over freedom, and black people fought for their freedom. They weren't just waiting for somebody else to hand it to them. They actually fought for the freedom that they received. But growing up a white kid, I never heard that until Glory. Growing up a black kid, did you know that? Like, was that something that everybody told you that they were proud of? Like, look, our ancestors did this or something, or were they just in the dark as we were?
Well, many of them were in the dark just as you were. But for me, I've been, like I said, lucky because of my uncle, but also at the time I went to school in the 1960s, DC had a track system, and I was in the honors track. So I got to go to Gettysburg twice. Once in the 4th grade and once in the 8th grade. And once I went to Gettysburg, I was in love with the Civil War. So even though I work at these 4 battlefields here, these are close second, but Gettysburg is still my favorite battlefield.
It's such a common story.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my teacher from the 4th grade to the 6th grade was Nora Drew Gregory. And her brother was Dr. Charles Drew. And even though she was a school teacher, she taught us a lot about Black history at the time. It was called Afro-American history back then. And since her father was real famous for discovering blood plasma, her brother was famous for that.
Oh, cool.
Her husband was Dr. Francis Gregory, who was in charge of most of the DC public schools education. And her son was Frederick Gregory, the astronaut. And I got to meet him while I was in school. And then so I knew about the U.S. colored troops. She taught us about that. And I always had that fascination with the Civil War, so I would read books, and I knew about the U.S. colored troops a long time.
Okay.
But I would tell you that was it 2013, I think it was, John Hennessy and I did a special Black history program for the 3 Black churches, Baptist churches in Fredericksburg. They came from Shiloh Baptist Church, was down in the water, close to Sophia Street. You went to George Mason, so you weren't far from Fredericksburg.
Right.
So that Shiloh was in Fredericksburg during the time of the Civil War. And then later on, because of damage during the war, the back wall fell down. And then what they did, they bought some new property, and half of the congregation stayed at the old property and rebuilt it. Half of it found a new property, they rebuilt it. So the church split.
Okay.
And then the church split again, so it formed 3 different churches. Now, like I said, the churches had been there since before the Civil War. And when John and I did the program, the Black History program, all 3 of the churches got together. We were supposed to have like a 5-minute question and answer session after the tour. Well, that ended up being an hour and a half session.
Wow.
And we talked to them about Black soldiers because the Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania National Military Park was segregated for a long time. And even though some of those people in there were 60, 70, 80 years old, most of them had never even been to the Battlefield Visitor Center, which is like maybe 6 blocks away from the church. So
you're saying that when you say that the battlefield was segregated, what do you mean? Like the visitor center?
It was a segregated park for quite some time. In fact, if you go there now, right by the handicapped bathroom, it will tell you at the time of segregation, that was the bathroom that Black people had to use. And then they couldn't use the restrooms in the visitor center. And in fact, I had visited the Fredericksburg battlefield in about 1958 or early 59 when I was like 6 years old. My father brought me to the battlefield. Now, I never did go in the visitor center at that time, but I was standing on top of Marie's Heights, and I was a real short kid, so I thought I was on top of the world. But that even added more, so when I came back to Fredericksburg, I think I'd been there plenty of times since 1959. And in 1994, when I was in the Graduate School of Retail Bank Management, all of the managers, these were from all across the United States. So we were in suites, and we had a 3-year session, and all 3 summers we would have our classes at the University of Virginia. So one of the guys with me was a Civil War reenactor, and I was a Civil War buff at the time. Mm-hmm. And the other 4 guys that were with me, they hadn't had a thing about the Civil War. They didn't know anything about it. Okay. So the reenactor, Dan, and I brought them to the 4 battlefields of Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania. We gave them a tour. And this was like 1995. And never thinking that I would come back 10 years later and work at the park.
Yeah.
So that got me in the habit of doing that. But I'm really surprised. But even to this day, there's still people who have lived in Fredericksburg 60 and 70 years and still have not been to the park. But at the time when they grew up, though, the textbooks were actually controlled by the Daughters of the Confederacy.
Right.
So they never learned about soldiers. A lot of them learned about it for the movie Glory. But actually, a lot of those people were hearing about the U.S. colored troops for the first time from me and John. So a lot of them didn't even see the movie.
I'm absorbing that here because that's hard to imagine. I often say this on the show, like I feel bad for people who have died, let's say 15 or more years ago, before all of, because we're getting a lot of new books on the Civil War where people are really honing in on very specific things, and through that we're getting a bigger picture of what the war was like. And I always say I feel bad for the people who died before this time, and they died thinking, as Civil War buffs, that the war was this particular way, or as opposed to this way or that way, or whatever the hell it is that we're discovering now. And so I just feel what a shame it is and what a disservice it is to the Civil War generation that the subsequent generations had to fiddle with the history and the telling of it, because they weren't giving a full story and a full accounting of who and what, like who participated and what they did. And I'm glad to be alive now and learning all this stuff, right? It's just a more interesting picture now.
Well, if you come to the Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania National Military Park, if you hadn't been there since 2014, then you wouldn't have seen any evidence of Black soldiers.
Yeah.
In 2014 was when they changed and added an African-American history story to both the Fredericksburg Visitor Center and the Chancellorsville Visitor Center. In fact, in Chancellorsville, they do have an exhibit about the 23rd USCT. So the National Park Service has changed a lot. So now for me, I've done events at Gettysburg, the 4 parks of my park, Richmond, several of the battlefields there, and also Appomattox and Petersburg. So we did the Battle of the Crater for about 5 or 6 years in a row. But I tell you, you'll be surprised at how many people still come into the national parks and don't know about the U.S. Colored Troops.
Oh,
In fact, I did a presentation in Richmond last year. This same presentation, I added a little bit different to it, but this was a history tour.
Mm-hmm.
They go every year, they go some places. There's a group, I think it's like 40 some people now. And out of those 40 some people, only about 5 or 6 of them knew about USCT and the Civil War.
Now, you mentioned how if you haven't been to these parks since 2014, you wouldn't have seen these exhibits. I know that here at Gettysburg, I know this from behind the scenes conversations because they're not allowed to say it publicly, but there's certain exhibits that are recent that need to be submitted to Washington for reconsideration or something like that. Are any of these exhibits that you're talking about at these other parks under that type of threat?
Well, they were. We were asked to look at all of our exhibits and make sure that we didn't have any disparaging information there. However, they said the information you have there has to be historically researched. And if you can prove that this happened, then you can keep it. So we got to keep everything that we have in our museum because we have everything researched.
So is it that they're just looking to make sure it's not editorialized, or what is it?
They look for things like, I'm not sure how much I can actually say.
I don't want to get you in trouble. Don't worry about it.
Slave masters and stuff like that. But we didn't put it that way,
Yeah.
They own slaves. We said they own slaves. So
right. Okay. All right. I don't want to get you in trouble because that's not what we're talking about anyway.
But I'm not working now, so technically they can't.
Oh well, then by all means, blow the lid off.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so
let's go back mid-April. So don't want to do that.
You said that during the 30th anniversary of the movie Glory, you went to a screening and you were kind of surprised to find there were only 25 people in the audience.
Right.
That shocked me to hear that too. Was that the only showing for the 30th in your area?
Oh no.
Okay, so maybe they had gone
several days. Yeah, but the day I went was like on a weekend. It was only 30, and I had my kepi on. I didn't have this. I had my kepi since it was 54. This was 23rd. But my wife was she was a member at that time of the Women of the Civil War, and 3 of her friends were with her. Now I was there because it was at the same time that my fellow soldiers from the 54th. Most of them are living in the Washington, D.C. area. So they went to the movie theater up there, and I went to the one in Fredericksburg. And when I came out, there were 2 white guys who actually asked me about the 54th. So I stayed there and talked with them about the 54th at the time. But I was just surprised. In D.C., I think the movie was packed, but out here was not at all.
Well, and I don't want to sit too long, and we probably already have, on the movie Glory, but it is such an iconic movie, and I think a pivotal movie, and inspirational, a lot of things for Civil War buffs. And we all, I mean, I know a lot of guys in my sphere that I interact with, you know, glory is a big deal, maybe even more so than the movie Gettysburg. And we're a Gettysburg show, and, you know, but glory is something different. And I know that when I'm working on something, if I have to write or something like that, I will put the glory soundtrack on in the background. And what's that?
I do the same thing. You think like me. Whenever I'm writing on something about the Civil War, I have a soundtrack with Glory, Gettysburg, and Gods and Generals, and I have them all together.
Yeah. Gettysburg's another one. Lonesome Dove is another one. That's not even a Civil War one, but it's such a great soundtrack and it moves me. But Glory is the one more than all the others that I go to all the time. I have to, I assume it has something to do with the Harlem Boys Choir and those high notes that they hit. How the hell they do that, I don't know. But every time I hear it, I still get a shiver down my spine. You know, I haven't gotten desensitized to that soundtrack yet, and I listen to it almost incessantly.
It's a good thing you're talking about Glory, because next week, one of the roundtables we're having a tribute to Glory.
Oh, great.
And we're having several of the members who were in the movie, and also some behind-the-scenes crew as well. And they're going to talk about the making of the movie, actually being in the movie, and then the after effects of the movie.
Where's that?
It's going to be on the African Americans in the Civil War Era Roundtable. That's aacwert.org, and it's going to be a Zoom presentation. So they can go on the website and they can just get the link. And it's going to be February 26th at 7:15 Eastern Time. And they can just click on the link and they can hear some of the original people. That
is something I have to check out. I would love that. I actually sent an email to the Harlem Boys Choir because they were defunct, I think, or disbanded in I want to say 2017 or 2006 or 7, somewhere around there. And recently they've been trying to bring it back. And one of the projects they have that they're working on is getting the alumni of the soundtrack to Glory, finding out where they are and everything. And that's something that I've been wanting to work on. And so I contacted them about that, and it was just the other day, so I haven't heard back yet, but I'm sure I won't hear back.
I just have one complaint with the movie, though.
Well, that's what I want to get into. Go ahead. What?
Okay.
What is it?
Okay, that complaint is that the movie shows a regiment that does not reflect the 54th Massachusetts.
That was exactly my question, sir. Yeah. So we, down here, Ranger John Hoptack, big fan of the movie Glory, obsessed with the movie Glory. He did a lecture a few years ago about the 54th, and because a large chunk of I think it was 118 of them were from here, this area, and so he just kind of went into all that. So go ahead and share with us, like, what is it that they're getting wrong about the makeup of the regiment?
Okay, the regiment was almost entirely made up of free men, and many of them were very well educated. And there were so many, because they came from all across the North. And they had so many people come and answer those recruitments from the recruiters like Frederick Douglass. So in fact, he had 2 sons in the 54th. But they had so many men that they created the 54th Massachusetts, the 55th Massachusetts, and the 5th Massachusetts Cavalry. So if you saw the movie Lincoln was talking to 2 USCT soldiers. One was obviously a slave. He was from the 2nd Kansas, but one was from the 5th Massachusetts. And he was the one who talked about that he could remember parts of the Gettysburg Address. And he says that he wasn't going to be a person who's going to be working in the fields. He wanted to do something using his mind. So that's the kind of soldiers they were. The soldiers in the movie were more like the 23rd USCT. Those men looked like they were mostly enslaved men, and they were learning. I mean, because like they said, there's your left and your right. These men already knew all of that.
Right.
So, but then I heard the director say he wasn't trying to make a historically accurate film. He wanted to make an action-packed film that people would go see.
Well, but I also think that again, very few people had a clue that black soldiers fought in the Civil War. So yeah, if this is going to be the first major motion picture about that subject, you have to make it a conglomeration of like everything. You got to throw it all in there. Otherwise.
But the thing does though, when they had when they first went south, you could tell the South Carolina soldiers were a lot different from the 54th Massachusetts.
Yes.
So that was the one thing that determined the difference. But that's the only thing I had a big thing, because even if you did the unit the way it should have been, it still would have been an action-packed movie, because they still did those things that they did in a movie.
Yeah.
So I just had a problem with the way he did that. So. Yeah.
Well, hopefully now, if there's another Civil War movie about black units, they can be a little more accurate as to who they were, and because now we know. Now we know. The cat's out of the bag. So now just give us the facts. So you mentioned Frederick Douglass's sons, Charles Douglas being one of them. Who was the other one?
I don't have his name right now.
Okay.
I can look it up later on, but I know Charles was the one that also went to the 5th Massachusetts Cavalry. Maybe
somebody watching in the audience now can look that up for us and get it to me in the comments so I could share it. So he was in the 54th, but then he transferred over to the 5th Mass Cavalry.
Yeah. So when I look at the African American Civil War Memorial, because they have the names of 209,145 men in the USCT there. And I was just at a program there. We were the color guard for, it was around Veterans Day. And even though the museum is still being renovated, I think when the government closed down, that pushed the renovation back, because the museum was supposed to open that day. But they had people out there reading all 209,145 names.
Wow.
It was 201,000 black soldiers, 7,000 white officers, and 1,145 Hispanics made up the U.S. colored troops.
Yeah, now that's a detail that we don't hear. We hear about the white officers. We don't hear about the 1,000 Hispanics that fought in the colored troops.
But Captain Emilio wrote a good book about the USC, the 54th Mass.
So it's general. Okay, well, before we get to the General Order 143, you've got examples of black units being raised without direction to do so from Washington. David Hunter, for example. Go into some of those there and how that, because at first it's like, yeah, cute, but no.
Okay. Well, when I'm at Fredericksburg, I always talk about President Lincoln writing the...
And by the way, sorry to interrupt you. Sorry, it's Lewis Douglas. So you have Charles Douglas and Lewis Douglas, who were in the 54th. Go ahead. Thank you, Mike.
Okay. So we talk a lot about President Abraham Lincoln issuing the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation 5 days after Antietam.
Mm-hmm.
But what they don't talk about is July 17th of 1862, when you have the Second Confiscation and Militia Acts. They were passed by Congress at that time. And those two acts allow the U.S. Army to use black people in any manner that they want to if it helps defeat the rebellion. So there's some of those enterprising generals like David Hunter and James Lane. They created units. And also Benjamin Butler down in Louisiana. So you're going to have about 5 to 6, I think. They talk about an obscure artillery unit of U.S. colored troops that was made up during that time. But you're going to have the 1st South Carolina, the 1st Kansas, and then the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Louisiana Native Guard. And Benjamin Butler is going to change their name to the Corps d'Afrique. Mm-hmm. But they were all done in 1862. So when you talked about David Hunter in South Carolina, he created the 1st South Carolina Colored Infantry. And he was told by President Lincoln that he couldn't do it. So they disbanded. But just weeks later, they're going to give General Saxton the authority to raise 5,000 troops. And then they reinstitute the 1st South Carolina colored, and they eventually have a second South Carolina colored as well from that. But Jim Lane, he's a senator, and he's from Kansas. And he actually, and let me just read a quote from what I had on the my slide. They talk about this daily conservative newspaper of October 6, 1861, and it describes Senator James H. Lane's cavalrymen as such. One peculiarity of this mounted force is curious enough to be noted down. By the side of one doughty and white cavalier rode an erect, well-armed, and very black man. His figure and bearing were such that, without any other distinguishing characteristic, he would still have been a marked man. But this is the first instance which has come to our personal knowledge, although not the only one, in fact, of a contraband serving as a Union soldier. So he started them in 1861, but they don't become the first Kansas colored until October that year. And they actually get into a battle in October. So they're the first U.S. colored troops to fight in the Civil War.
So Lincoln telling Hunter no, and then a couple weeks later, General Order 143 comes out. Is it because what?
143 comes out in 1863.
Okay, so I screwed something up there then. So,
but yeah, this was the first one authorized by the federal government, the War Department.
I see.
Yeah.
What was the reason? So Hunter raises the troops, and other people raise the troops in response to the Second Confiscation Act, right? You said, and it says you can
confiscation and militia. There were two acts.
Okay,
and together they allowed that.
And so is it they were getting creative and thinking, well, here we could use them any way we want. Let's make troops out of them. And then basically it was like, well, okay, maybe we should have been a little more clear. You can't do that.
Well, David Hunter also emancipated all of the slaves in his region. So that's another reason why Lincoln was trying to take power away from him.
Yeah, I want to be the one to do that. Is that really what it is? Okay, got it.
Because Lincoln had already planned the emancipation by that time.
Yeah.
But also during that time was when those 10,000 enslaved people escape around Fredericksburg. But they do it before the Second Confiscation and Militia Act.
So it's basically then it needs to be done not on a local level, but on an official federal level. And the timing needs to be right is basically kind of what Lincoln's thinking, right? Because otherwise it's just chaos and bedlam if everybody's going and doing whatever the hell they want to do.
Yeah, because General Fremont had done it before too, and he got reprimanded as well. It
carries more weight coming from Washington, I guess is the point. I'm guessing. I don't know. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, Lincoln is the only one that can really emancipate anybody.
Right. Okay.
He wants to make sure he keeps that power.
So 143 comes out, and how many? It says 166 regiments, I think you said?
Well, between 166 and 175. And the discrepancy in the number is because you have regiments like, say, the 30th Connecticut Infantry. Mm-hmm. They don't get enough men to make it a whole regiment. So they get pushed into the 31st USCT. And so they're going to be with the 4th Division of the 9th Corps. That's why I know about them. But there are other regiments that don't get enough men to make a full regiment. So they get put into another regiment. So even though they officially start out as one regiment, then they go into another unit.
I see. Okay.
So that's why you have the discrepancy in numbers. But I think officially they're going to say 166 regiments.
Okay. Gotcha. And then, and so that's regiments of infantry, cavalry, heavy artillery, engineers, and light artillery.
Right.
What is the so we talked about how in the 54th they're not all runaways. You know, a lot of them are educated and free, and they were born free and have businesses and other things like that, right? Engineers, though. engineers, that requires some pretty good education. So I'm guessing that, it's the same thing there as the 54th, where you're getting the educated people. You're not getting, in other words, they're not grabbing runaways and putting them in the engineers.
But you have to realize too, like we have this one soldier, Nimrod Burke.
Yeah.
I mean, he's in the Civil War from the beginning, but he couldn't register as a soldier because he worked for this man who became a major, the 36th Ohio. So he brought him in as a teamster and a scout. And that way he can learn all about the military. In Fredericksburg, we talk about John Washington. He became a manservant, but he also became a scout because he had known a lot of the areas around Virginia. So you had men serving in different positions already, that they were around the soldiers. They saw the discipline, they saw the marching. So when the U.S. colored troops come out, many of those men go into the Army and they actually make a living that way. But you don't have very many engineer units, but and your major unit is going to be infantry by far.
Right. So another interesting thing that you said in the talk was that that when black soldiers were being recruited purposely, that was coming at a time of a decline in white enlistment.
Right.
And I, oftentimes since I started doing this podcast, I've learned little facts like that make me go, wow, like we're lucky. And that's one of them is while white enlistment is going down, which if that's all you were going to allow to be a soldier, then that's a big problem, right? But now allowing this other group of people to come in and serve I'm sure it's not an equal 1-for-1 in the declination versus the, but it certainly is a help.
Because you got to look at the times too. In 1863, before Gettysburg, they were taking kind of losses.
That's a good point.
You look at the 7 days battles. Even though they were winning those battles, McClellan keeps retreating.
Yeah.
So they get counted as losses. Fredericksburg was a major battle and got lost.
Yeah.
Chancellorsville was even worse, actually. Mm-hmm. But what they weren't really calculating, though, even though these were bad losses for the Union, but they were really taking out a lot of Confederate men at that time. But however, when you have the U.S. colored troops, and especially when you have those enslaved people coming in, it is a 2-for-1, because not only are you getting them off plantations so that they can do the work of tending for food and planting food and harvesting the food, or harvesting cotton so they can sell it on the black market so they get money so they can have more weapons and more men in the army. So you're taking them away from that, and then you're making them soldiers as well. So now they're going to fight against you at that time. So it's going to be devastating for the South, because you're going to get a lot of soldiers from slavery. Yeah. Not all of them are volunteer either. You have to remember that, because as these slaves are escaping, they're escaping with their families, their wives, their children, their mothers, and old fathers and stuff. So when they go into these contraband camps, a lot of those men are made to become soldiers. Said, if you want your family here, you're going to have to work as a soldier.
Yeah, wow.
So that happens as well.
At Digital History Pioneers Foundation, we are about grassroots history on digital platforms. That means we are about podcasters, documentarians, YouTubers, and even TikTokers. All of these creators are out there trying to share their love of history with the public. They don't need ideas, they need funding, both from viewers and corporate donors. DH Pioneer's initial funding focus is on the Civil War era, with a special emphasis on the Addressing Gettysburg podcast. So be a vital part of the unique content Addressing Gettysburg has in store by donating at dhpioneers.com and help bring your love of history to the people. Digital History Pioneers is an IRS Section 501c3 approved charitable corporation that makes any donation tax deductible to the fullest extent of the law.
when the USCTs are formed, there's what, 4 regiments that get to keep their state designations?
Just 4.
So you got
Right.
54th, 55th, 5th Massachusetts Cavalry, right?
And the 29th Connecticut Colored Infantry.
Why do they get to keep their state designations?
Because they were some of the first from the Old North.
Oh, okay.
So it carries weight, especially because I know the governor of Massachusetts was an abolitionist governor too, so they need his political pull.
Got it.
They helped them out very quickly in the war.
Okay.
And, like the 54th was the first raised in the Old North, and then they quickly come back with the 55th and the 5th Mass Cavalry as well.
And so the 1st Kansas becomes what, the 35th?
Oh no, this the 1st North Carolina Colored Infantry becomes the 35th. And that's important because later on in that program, I talked about Lieutenant Colonel William N. Reed, and he was commanding that unit when they fought at the Battle of Ulusty. They were technically designated the 35th USCT at that time, but they were still having the banners of the 1st North Carolina Colored Infantry.
Okay.
And Lieutenant William N. Reed is leading them because the colonel was absent for some reason, and he gets killed in battle. But he is the highest ranking right now by Mollis, the Military Order of the Loyal Legion of the United States, as the highest ranking U.S. colored troop as an officer, even though it should be John Wells Jefferson. But
Right. And he's interesting, Jefferson, because he is the grandson of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings.
His name is really John Wells Hemings. And then because of the Fugitive Slave Act, they were living free at this time in Ohio. Now, his brother is going to stay in Ohio, and he's going to move his family to Wisconsin, and they're changing their names to Jefferson. And they tell everybody up there that, he's the son of Jefferson, and John Wells Jefferson is going to be the grandson of Thomas Jefferson.
That's amazing.
And he gets to serve, he gets enlisted as a major in the 8th Wisconsin, and he rises to colonel of the 8th Wisconsin. So he's a commander by the end of the war.
So, but he wasn't considered black, is what you're saying, right?
Well, nobody checked.
Oh.
When you go to Monticello now, you'll see his picture, and it's a total of 7. Some of them were not slaves at Monticello, but they married women from Monticello who were slaves. But you had 2 sons from the one Hemings brother, and then the 2 sons from the other Hemings brothers, and all 4 of those sons served in Union regiments. And I think most of them, they may have all 4 served in white units. And now the ones that were from Ohio, the soldiers that served with them knew that they were black, but they were so light-skinned that, they could pass for white.
Right.
But they were known to their regiment as being black.
Wow.
But not the 8th Wisconsin. The ones in Wisconsin, they were thought that they were white.
Just to correct myself, 1st Kansas later became the 79th USCT, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Because I don't know how they did those numbers, because you look at some of the records, you have like 79th old and 79th new. So I have to go back and check all of those. So far, I've been working mainly on the Eastern Theater, so this is where I would love to be. So
Yeah. We kind of talk about, well, how about I'll just say this? Black Confederates. Go ahead.
Well, I did a 5-part series about that for Emerging Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
But, I would say right before the 2012, or 2013 reenactment, I had a black school teacher from Spotsylvania County come to me with her class and ask me about their new history book that said there were 300,000 black Confederate soldiers. I said, no, there were 300,000 laborers, not soldiers. Now, the Confederate Army drafted blacks, free and slave, as laborers. And as late as November of 1864, President Jefferson Davis said that he listed all of these different occupations. And then at the end, he says, but not as soldiers. So the Congress had been dealing with this issue since the beginning of the war. But on March 13th, 1865, they passed legislation barely allowing black soldiers. Now, at first they said with the law that the black soldiers would be automatically free. But by the time it passed, and I guess this was because of the conversation between the two different parties or two different sides of Congress, they said that they would leave it up to their owners, no matter if they serve as soldiers or not. It's going to be up to the owners to free them. So they were expecting to get like 200,000 blacks to help them. And it still took 10 more days for the military to write up the order. So it's actually March 23rd before they have the orders for black soldiers. And then from, I think, March 25th to March 30th, you have some Richmond newspapers. Some say there were 12 marching in an integrated company. Some say 35, some even said 50. But that's about all they got, because Richmond falls April 2nd, and those soldiers didn't even get to fight. So
why do you think there is this need to find black Confederate soldiers? You know what I mean? Like black men who fought for the South.
Well, that stuff didn't even start coming about till after the movie Glory came out. So we figured that they thinking that they had to have something to compete with Glory. But really, you know, some of the things that said that maybe some slaves picked up weapons to fight, but the same thing happens on the northern side. You have some of those guys around, and they see that they can pick up a weapon and they can fight, then they do it. Yeah. But that still doesn't make them soldiers.
Yeah, there's a story here.
If you have people working, I don't care if they work in service jobs or not. If they're in the military, they're in the military. But back in the Civil War, that was not the case.
Right.
You may have gotten paid by a government or a county or something like that. But if you were not a soldier, you were not classified as military. So, and you had, the blacks that served as laborers. If they were free blacks, they got paid the same as a Confederate private. If they were slaves, then that money is paid to their owner. And the only thing that the Confederate government is going to do is make sure they are fed, make sure they have medical attention, and make sure they're clothed. So they're going to be clothed in Confederate uniforms because that's the only thing they have.
Right.
But they're not going to be classified as soldiers until after March 23rd. And like I said, if they had 300,000 soldiers, then that would have meant that they had more black soldiers than the Union Army did.
Right.
And they were afraid, because you have to think about it. After Nat Turner's rebellion, where they killed so many white people, and if you have 80% of all your white men fighting in the army, are you going to arm slaves now when they have mainly women and old men and children?
No.
So that was the big debate in the Confederate Congress.
Right, right.
But for a black man who wanted to be a soldier, now they're thinking that if they fight for their country, then they would have to be freed after that. And that's the way the legislation was going until it was actually approved. And they still gave the owner the right to, free the slave or keep the man enslaved. But how do you keep a man enslaved after he fought a war? So that would have come back. That would have been even worse for the South.
Sure. Well, it's okay. They weren't going to win anyway.
No, I didn't think so.
Not at that point.
Because, some of the other men, they could have still drafted more men.
Yeah.
And the Confederates were losing so many men. Like when I talk about Chancellorsville, even though Chancellorsville is Lee's greatest victory, Lee loses over 13,000, almost 14,000 men. And he lost more killed than the Union did. The Union Army had a lot of prisoners because a lot of those were 90-day regiments. And those men were ready to get out. And they get to be prisoners. When they come back, they're free. But in the killed and wounded, the Confederates are going to suffer more than the Union Army.
Wars are such a mess, aren't they? It's a real mess.
It is.
Tell me about okay, so let's get into the battles, especially here in the Eastern Theater that the USCT are really known for, like the Battle of the Crater, for example. Things like that. Go into that part of. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to put the link to his full talk in the description here, so that you can go and see it without my stupid questions and comments.
Good questions.
Thank you.
Well, Battle of the Crater. But before we get there, there's some other battles, like the Battle of Wilson's Wharf. And that's that reenactment goes on every year. And I participated in it, but mostly every time you participate in that battle, it rains. And it pours down, raining down there. That's part of right on the James River. But that was the first real battle between black soldiers and the Army of Northern Virginia. And that's only because Fitz Lee is there. He's leading about 2,500 men against Fort Pocahontas, which is only garrisoned by about 900 black soldiers, some from the 1st USCT, others from the 10th USCT. And then just when the battle is starting, you're going to get about 150 white soldiers that were coming back from furlough. They're going to join in. You're going to have 2 batteries, and then you're going to have a battleship come in. So those about 1,100 men are going to hold off these 2,500 men. It's all because you have General Edward Wild. He's called, he's an abolitionist. He's already been wounded before the Civil War. And he had been raiding in North Carolina and southeastern part of Virginia. And he's doing that, freeing slaves and then getting more men into his, what they call Wild's African Brigade. And they find this really bad slaveholder. And he had just beaten this woman, and she comes into the fort. And they get him, and he has one of his former slaves whip him. And then he has, I think it was like 2 women that escaped from him. He has them whip the man, and then they let him go. And he goes back, and he is pretty wealthy, so it gets back to the Confederate government. So they send Fitz Lee and cavalry, and they come in, and they want to take over Fort Pocahontas. But they really called it Wilson's Wharf because that's what the wharf was called, that's leading into the fort. Okay. And they drive in the pickets from the outside, and then all of a sudden, General Fitzhugh Lee is going to send a surrender letter. And it's going to come to General Wild, and Wild is going to decline the offer and say, we'll try it. And then it added, present my compliments to General Fitz Lee and tell him to go to hell. And then they attack, but the Union casualties were less than 47. Confederate casualties were between 175 to 200. And they leave some of their Confederate soldiers on the battlefield. So that's how they know that they had quite a few casualties. So now they got to go back to Richmond and explain how they lost to some black soldiers in the fort where you had, 2,500 Confederate men against 1,100 soldiers. But
sounds like General Wild is aptly named.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I still haven't gotten his whole biography, but he's a very interesting person. So eventually, when I just stop doing all the things I'm doing, I'm going to really read that.
Yeah.
But then when you go to the First Battle of Petersburg on June 15th of 1864, the Union Army actually could have won Petersburg that first day because of all the fighting. You had a lot of the U.S. colored troops involved there, and they were very instrumental in capturing quite a few of the redoubts surrounding Petersburg. In fact, Petersburg was left with just about 5,000 soldiers left when General Winfield Scott Hancock with his Second Corps comes in, and he's with Baldy Smith and his corps. But it's like around 8 o'clock at night, and they could attack Petersburg at night, and they probably would have won Petersburg at that time. But Baldy Smith says, well, the men are tired. And then Hancock has been used up ever since the Battle of the Wilderness, and he's still suffering from the pain in his wounds he got from Gettysburg. So he listens to Smith, and they're going to wait and attack Petersburg on June 16th in the morning. Well, they didn't know Beauregard was on the telegraph, and they had captured prisoners from both the Army of the Potomac and the Army of the James. And he tells Lee that he has both the Army of the Potomac and Army of the James here. So Lee, who had been kind of hedging, trying to send some people to Richmond and keep some people to Petersburg. So now he's going to send the whole army of Northern Virginia down, except for a cover in Richmond. And the next day, when Smith and Hancock attack, it's not going to work. And then you're going to have the siege of Petersburg set in from that time. But if they had attacked that night, they probably would have taken Petersburg that day. But the U.S. colored troops, they went in with the motto, "Remember Fort Pillow." And they murdered a lot of prisoners and also the wounded guys. So they didn't stop till the white officer said, "Okay, that's enough blood. There's so much blood. That's enough blood." Yeah. And then you don't see them in the battle June 16th and June 17th. And they stayed pretty much away from the battle, except for in the Army of the James, the 10th and the 18th Corps have divisions of black troops. So they're going to fight more around the Richmond area. Benjamin Butler let those men fight. But Meade, now that Burnside is now back under Meade, Meade doesn't really want the black soldiers to fight. And in fact, when you get to the Battle of the Crater, General Burnside had already trained some of those black regiments that when you have the big explosion, you're going to go around the crater. Right. Well, Meade is going to go behind his back and says, "Well, I'll present both versions to General Grant." And he didn't want, Meade did not want the black troops to attack first. So Meade gets his way. General Burnside, now his plans are all messed up. Instead of him taking charge about, let's see who's going to attack and how we're going to do this, he has his generals of the 3 white divisions draw straws, and General Ledlie, who's one of the worst generals, has the shortest straw, so he's got to send his men in. Now, instead of telling him anything, he said, "You're going to hear this big explosion, then you're going to go up to the crater," and that's all he tells him. And then he goes into a bomb-proof and starts drinking. Yeah. And then the next white division does the same thing. Well, they had been fighting in earthworks all this time. And that's one of the reasons why Burnside wanted the black troops to fight, because they hadn't been going into earthworks. But the crater is 30 feet deep. Yeah. So, I mean, that's not going to be militarily advantage to you to stay in the crater. No. But the third group of white soldiers go around, and there's some other earthworks beside the crater. So they go there. And finally, they let the black troops charge, and they go around like they're supposed to. But by that time, Confederates have reinforcements. Now, the black troops make it closer to Petersburg than any other white troops, but now they're all forced into the crater. So they're going to have to make up their mind whether they're going to stay there and be slaughtered or take their chances and run out the back of it. God. Well, that was a debacle. What a hellhole. More than Burnside for that. Yeah. Yeah. So did Meade not want to do them because he didn't want to make it look like he was sacrificing them, or did he want the glory of this great victory to go to white soldiers? Or do we not know? I think Meade is conservative, so Meade is one of those McClellan generals. Okay. I don't think he cares less about black troops at all. And in fact, Benjamin Butler had asked for that black division before the Battle of the Crater, because he fights his men. He has a division in the 10th Corps, a division in the 18th Corps, and they fight well at different places. New Market Heights, they fight very well at New Market Heights. But Meade, he's going to come up with the ideas, how is this going to look, General Grant, to Abraham Lincoln, if we send those soldiers in first and they get slaughtered? Well, he doesn't say that Burnside had trained these men to go around the crater. So Burnside didn't go to Grant to make his side of the case at all. He let Meade do everything. Okay. So I just think Meade wants black soldiers. And like I said, after the crater, they do go to General Butler. And then they fight with the 25th Corps, and some of them fight with the 24th Corps.
And then out in Tennessee, Nashville, we've got some black troops out there kicking butt and taking names. What goes on over there?
Well, that's because you have General George Henry Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to me, I put him like the second best Union general in the whole army.
Yeah.
And he was a Virginian who stayed loyal to the Union. But they kept overlooking him. And in fact, before the Battle of Nashville, Grant was going to go out there and replace him. But he said, "It's ice storm out here. I can't do anything." Plus, when they took Atlanta, General Sherman takes most of the good soldiers with him, most of the good cavalry with him when he did his march to the sea, and left General Thomas having to fight his way back to Nashville to make sure the Confederates don't get Nashville. And I tell you, General Early goes out there and he just ignores General Sherman, and he goes after that Nashville area. And in two battles, Thomas has to build up his army. So he's going to get some black divisions, some black troops. And he's going to get some troops that have been disabled, and then he's going to get some few troops. So he takes that time to really train his troops. And then when Nashville is going to come under siege, then they have the ice storm. And he is preparing his men. And then as soon as the ice storm breaks, he's going to do something really different. He is going to have the black and white troops fighting together, which is not very often in the Civil War. And he's going to hit that Confederate right flank very, very hard. Confederate left flank very, very hard. And then they're going to drive it back. They're going to make it seem like that's the major part of the attack. So Early is going to take some of his men from his left and put them over to the right. And when he does that, then that's when Thomas hits that other flank, and he just destroys them. Plus, he has his cavalry dismounted, and he had them go all the way around to the rear of the Confederate army. So Early starts out with 60,000 men. After the Battle of Nashville, he's down to like 8,000 men. And his army is taken away from him and sent to North Carolina.
Wow. All right. I love this because it's all brand new to me. So it's exciting, like I kind of feel like I'm a kid again learning about this stuff for the first time, because it's basically all new stuff to me. And so sometimes I'm just sitting here kind of dumbfounded, taking it all in, trying to think of what to ask you next. Like I said, I'm putting the link to the entire talk that you gave in the comment section here so people can go and watch it uninterrupted. It is very good, and it is worth your time for sure, especially since it's Black History Month, and we got to get some of that history in here for sure. I honestly think I'm not a big month guy. I like, just learning about history throughout the entire year, and I don't like to separate it. It's just American history in my book. Yeah. I'm in the Morgan Freeman camp on this one. Like, we're all Americans and this is our history. Yeah. And it's about time.
Fredericksburg, just bring it all together instead of trying to do it separately.
I'm sorry, say that again.
That's what we try to do at Fredericksburg. Most of the guys there, battlefield rangers and stuff, we try to bring all of it in together. So,
because it is together. It's all the same story, Sure. It's just different scenes, different characters, but it's all the same plot, It's all the same story. So I think it should be together like that. Steward, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, because the colored troops would have fought at the Battle of the Wilderness when Gordon's flank attack hit. Yeah. And they drove the 6th Corps back. And they had ordered the 4th Division in, and they were going in at the double quick, but then that's when the 6th Corps stopped Gordon's flank attack. So when the shooting stopped, they rerouted them and put them on the Orange Turnpike, and they had to guard wagon trains and prisoners and bring the wounded back and forth. So, it could have been a more different story if they had gotten to the fight on May 6th.
I wonder what, in all of your research, you've come across accounts from black soldiers, I'm sure. Obviously, you have to. What is the fighting motivation that they have? The motivation to fight? I would imagine it's. I don't imagine. I have to know that it's different than for white troops. They don't care about Union, right? they're like, I got to get free or whatever it is, right? But they're also
actually, you're not going to get very much from a lot of black soldiers because a lot of them have not been literate. So you get like, I know like the first USCT, they have their Reverend Turner, and he is going to write letters to the families. But most of the men want to prove that they're men. That's one of the first things they say. They want to prove that they're men and not animals. And a lot of the white soldiers talk about how disciplined they are when they go into battle.
Yeah.
And, but, you know, one thing I mentioned, I think was when all the soldiers got into Petersburg, when you had all of those units there, both from the Army of the James and the Army of the Potomac, a lot of them were seeing their family, like their sons or their brothers that they hadn't seen, that had been sold away from it. So it was like a family reunion for part of those soldiers. But they wanted to fight for their, I would say like one soldier, Abraham Tuckson, he was with the 23rd and he gets killed at the Battle of the Crater. But before, he had been driving wagons for the Confederates. And then when the Union Army takes over Fredericksburg, he actually went to his old master's house. He wanted to get his wife and kids away. And the owner got a shotgun, was going to keep him away. And he actually went to the provost guard and had him removed so that he couldn't even come see his family anymore. So he's still fighting so he can free his family, but he gets killed at the Battle of Crater.
Yeah, so there's a lot more to why they fought.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's
the main thing is they need to prove that they're men. And you have to think about it. Like Frederick Douglass talks about it. They said, this is your time. This is when you have to stand. And you have to, you have to be present in this history. So, and he talks about it. He says, let the black man get an eagle on his button, the brass letters U.S., and bullets in his pocket and a musket on his shoulder. And he says, there's no power on the earth or under the earth which can deny that he has earned his right of citizenship in the United States.
Yeah.
Because we have to remember, after the Dred Scott decision, that Chief Justice Taney said blacks have no citizenship right in the United States. And many of them their families have been in the United States since the 1600s. So, saying this is the chance that we can earn our citizenship right here. And after the Civil War, you have the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments come in. So they did earn those rights.
Wow, those stakes are so high for them because it's not only to earn something, but, as we know, you get caught.
Oh, yeah.
You're not getting a fair treatment. You're not being treated as a soldier.
And that's why I like the scene in Glory when they're talking about just before they're going into battle.
Yeah.
And, some of those speeches remind me of when I played football. When you get into the huddle and stuff and they just rev you up.
Yeah.
But they were fighting for much more,
Yeah.
And they said they couldn't be cowards because then that just proves what the Confederates say and what the Union people say. Because in Fredericksburg, during the first occupation, most of those white soldiers had never seen blacks at all, free blacks nor slaves. And I've transcribed letters from those soldiers, and you can tell from this one soldier from the first time he was seeing black, and he wrote a letter back to his home. He talks about he didn't even want them in the camp. And then as time goes on, he says, wow, they come here, they want to work for us, they want to do this for us. And by the last letter that I had transcribed, he really wanted those black people free. So, once they got around those blacks, especially, they were just so glad that to get out of the bondage of slavery that they did anything. They would cook for them, clean for them, wash their clothes and everything. So, yeah, they changed a lot of those soldiers' minds then. And that's another reason those 10,000 could come in self-emancipation, because those white soldiers looked out after them.
Huh. Let me, if I may, ask you a more personal question.
Okay.
As a historian, as somebody who's very learned on this topic, but also as an African American, How does all of this make you feel? What do all the feelings that you go through when you're reading about this part of our history?
Well, it gives me pride because I've known about it for so long, and I'm seeing people, especially when we first started the 23rd. I mean, a lot of the people that joined didn't know very much about the U.S. colored troops.
Right.
So every time we did an event, like for the first 2 or 3 years, I had to be the one to mainly tell everybody about the history. And when we did the programs, I was the only one talking. And just going back to, we just had our annual meeting in January 31st. So now I made the historian of the group. So I'm going to be writing the history of the 23rd, a small history that I can give to everybody who's a part of the 23rd. So they'll know what to say when they go out, and they don't really need me to go with them everywhere.
Okay.
But for me, it's tremendous pride in just to tell the stories of these soldiers, because so many of them couldn't write, and some of them had a hard time communicating, because when you had the more educated soldiers and they were coming from the North, a lot of times they could hardly understand what the slaves are saying to them, or the enslaved are saying to them. Because I mean, different parts of the country, you have different dialects and things like that, and especially they talk about South Carolina and some of the things that they learned on the outskirts of South Carolina. So it's hard for them, and like I say, the preachers and also the soldiers who could write, because when I play a corporal, because I said I'm not the best soldier, but I could write and do all of those things. So I would be one of those recording corporals. And so I would be the ones, they would be coming to me, and I'd be the ones writing the letters to their homes and to their families. So, the only reason why I chose to be a corporal when I had the 23rd was because my father was a corporal in the Army.
Okay.
And in the 54th, you have to earn your ranks. On the 54th, I'm a private. But at the 23rd, I could just choose my rank because we started it. Right. But when you go out there and you're talking to people, you have to think about what they did and the bravery. Yeah. Especially when they weren't even considered real people at the time. So it makes me very proud of what they did.
Yeah, that's it's so hard to wrap my mind around that way. Picture. I just can't. How does it make you feel about the history of the country, and how does it make you feel about the country in your lifetime?
Well, I can tell you, I wrote my first critical piece of the Civil War when I was in the 11th grade, and I wrote about Abraham Lincoln, and I said the Emancipation Proclamation did not free all of the slaves in the country, and my 11th grade English literature teacher told me that I had great research, and I had, I wrote it very well, but she didn't like my subject. And I had to take it all the way to the principal to get her to approve it. She went to my father, who was a printing teacher at the time at my high school, and she just couldn't believe I would write something about Abraham Lincoln like that. And I said, well, he was the president. He was a good president, but he's still a man, and he still made mistakes, and he still did other things that were very good. I like the Emancipation Proclamation, but when I talk about it, it only frees the slaves in the southern states still in rebellion against the Union. And it has to be from September 22nd when he wrote it until January 1st, where he's going to write the real legislation for it. Right. So, and I said it takes the 13th Amendment to free all of the slaves. Right. But I guess she wasn't a history teacher. She was just an English teacher. But she was really upset with me for a while until, everybody said, well, he's telling you the truth. Right. Well, you can't criticize Lincoln, Well, he's, like I said, he's a person. I mean, I like Lincoln. I think he's one of the best presidents we've ever had, but I got to tell the truth. Well, I think that's what I like about the works coming out now by historians is that they seem to be the first batch of historians who are taking into account that we're talking about human beings.
And we're not talking about these, monolithic, mythical, fictional characters. Like they're real men and real women, and they go through all the same stuff we go to today, and they make mistakes. And they are, I know a lot of people don't like to extend this to people, but they are limited by their job. So Lincoln is not a king. He's not a dictator. He has to do things a certain way. They're limited by their time. You can only get away with so much in your own time. Otherwise, your society is going to chew you up alive and spit you out, and you'll be done. Sure. So you can't push the envelope too far in whatever time you're in.
And then you got to think about the times that you're living in too. I mean,
well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
You have to think about that. So
of course you do. And so yes, of course. That's what I love about all the studies that are coming out now, because they are taking into account that these are very much people, just like you, just like me, and it makes me. It helps me to study these stories. It helps me to kind of deal with things in my own life. When I come to a crossroads or some kind of dilemma, I look at these other people that went through far worse than I have gone through, and hope I never have to go through anything like this.
So my main example of that is when I'm talking about the Union soldiers attacking the stone wall at Fredericksburg.
Yeah.
As people, and so many people say, well, I wouldn't do it. I said, well, you got to think about the time period you're in.
Yeah.
If somebody even, tries to make any kind of aversion to your family or anything, you're going to challenge them to a duel, or you're going to fight. But I'm saying in the Civil War, you have to worry about, the regiments that were raised. You're fighting with your relatives, your friends, your classmates, and you're going to just get up and say, I'm not going to do it. Then that means you can never go home anymore.
Right.
And, I had an uncle who just passed away. He was, I used to go with him down to the Chiefs Club. He was a Navy chief, and he had to go to Vietnam as a Marine Corps medic. And he would tell me stories. So I think I spent about 20 years in the Chiefs Club with him. Everybody thought I was in the Navy. But I think it was on Monday nights, these Vietnam vets would get together. They would talk about the things, especially the ones that went in 62, 63. They would talk about, they would be calling artillery fire right in on their own positions. And one thing that they taught me was that when you're a soldier, or when you're a Marine, because they don't want to be called soldiers,
right?
Your family, you have to take care of each other, because especially out where they were, they said there was no one else you can depend on. Mm-hmm. So you can't be a coward.
Right.
And when my uncle told me that they were targeting Marine medics at the time, they threw a hand grenade and wounded a Marine. He went over there and he was trying to help that Marine, and they threw another hand grenade. He said 8 other Marines surrounded him. All 8 of them died. He got wounded, but he saved the man he was working on.
God.
And when he used to come back to Washington, D.C., and he'd go to that Vietnam Wall, he'd go to each one of those 8 men. He'd break down right there.
Yeah.
And he actually came back and became a reverend. So, I mean, I just couldn't believe it. I said, all the stuff we did, and you're going to be a preacher? He said, yeah. So,
oh, God. Well, yeah, I mean,
so
you have, I guess if you're going to have any sanity in your life, you have to do that, right? You have to go that way. Otherwise, you're going to have a miserable existence.
So, I mean, when I think about those Vietnam vets, the way they were treated, and then I compare that to the soldiers that I have to talk about. And then, I mean, the gruesome details they talked about when they were there, because they couldn't tell their families that. Because, right. So they could only talk amongst each other because they had all been through that same thing. So when I go out to the Bloody Angle and I talk about all of the gore and how horrific that fighting was out there, then I can take, what I learned from them, and I can just transfer it back to the Civil War. So.
Yeah. You mentioned a book that you're writing with the history of the 23rd for the fellow reenactors in the unit.
Oh, it's not a book; it's just a paper.
Oh, it's just a paper. Are you going to?
Brian is writing the book of the 23rd.
Have you written a book, or do you plan on writing a book?
I'll probably, if I get down to it, I'm going to write a book about the history of all the USCT.
Great.
But right now I've written so many blogs for Emerging Civil War.
Yeah.
And also in the 10th anniversary editions of the books, on 3 of the books, I have essays in there. And
well, hurry up and put them all together and make a book out of it.
Yeah, I have so much paper I've written already.
Yeah.
Probably like a book.
Yeah.
I've been doing it now for like 15 years now. I can't believe it's been that long. 15 years.
Yeah, that's plenty of time. Now you can put it all together in one nice book and then come back on the show and talk more about it.
Okay.
Steward, I really enjoyed this. It opened my eyes to a lot of things, and I encourage everybody watching to click that link in the description and watch his full talk on it. It's fascinating stuff. Thank you very much for doing the show. Thank you very much for doing all the history that you're doing for the public. This was a great pleasure for me.
Yeah, you're working where I like to be, Gettysburg. So.
Yeah, it's a great place. It's a great place. It is. And when you come up, let me know, and we'll get together and have a beer or something, okay?
Next time I come up. Okay.
I would love that. Thank you very much.
Anytime.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for watching. I hope you got something out of this and enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.